Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much.
What if letting go wasn't the end, but the beginning? What if the pain you're avoiding is actually the path to peace? And what if the person you're holding on to is the one keeping you from your healing? Letting go is one of the hardest things we're ever called to do in this life. Not because we're weak, not because we're desperate, but because we love deeply. We gave our heart. We believed in something. We carried hope like a torch through the darkest nights. And when that flame finally burned out, we were left standing in the ashes, uncertain, confused, and clinging to what once was. So we held on. We held on to the memories, to the silence, to the unanswered questions. We held on because somewhere deep down, we convinced ourselves that letting go meant giving up, that it meant losing. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping us stuck? Letting go is not losing. It's choosing peace. Some of us stay tied to things that no longer serve our soul. We replay old conversations in our heads. We scroll through photos and read old messages like they still carry the same weight they once did. But in our hearts, we know this season is over. Something has shifted, and still we resist. Why? Because it's easier to cling to familiar pain than it is to walk into unfamiliar healing. But listen closely. Holding on to someone who no longer wants to be there, or who is never meant to stay, is not a sign of strength. It's a form of resistance. Resistance to the very healing God is trying to bring into your life. When God removes someone, it isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's divine redirection. And if you keep forcing what was never meant to remain, you'll delay what's trying to come. Some of you aren't tired because life is too difficult. You're exhausted because you're carrying too many expired relationships in your heart. You're dragging dead weight through a life that's still moving. You're trying to resuscitate something that God has already called finished. And I say this with nothing but care and compassion. It's time to let go. Let them go, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with peace. Release them gently with grace. And more importantly, release yourself with even more grace. There's a kind of peace you can't explain that comes the moment you stop chasing something that was never meant to stay. On the other side of surrender, there's freedom. But you'll never walk into that freedom until you unclench your fists and release what you've been gripping so tightly. You can't receive what's next when your hands are full of what's past. God can't pour new wine into old wineskins. And how can you embrace the present if you're still consumed by the past? Maybe you're thinking, but I gave them everything. And yes, I believe you did. You loved deeply. You gave from a place of honesty and vulnerability. That is not something to regret. That's something to be proud of. Your love was real. Your intentions were pure. But just because you gave your best doesn't mean they were the best for you. Just because you saw their potential doesn't mean they were meant to fulfill it beside you. Sometimes we confuse loyalty with bondage. We stay attached and call it faithfulness, when in reality, it's fear wearing the mask of love. But here's the truth. Letting go isn't giving up, it's growing up. It's stepping into a new season with clarity. It's learning that peace is more important than proximity, that closeness means little without shared purpose. Sometimes people walk out not because they're bad, but because the chapter was never meant to go further. Not every chapter ends in a fairy tale, and that's okay. Some chapters end in silence. And that silence? It's not empty. It's space for your soul to finally hear what God has been trying to say all along. Letting go doesn't mean the love disappears. It just means you're finally loving yourself enough to stop waiting on someone who stopped showing up. You don't have to hate them to move on. You just have to honor your healing. You don't need closure to begin healing. You don't need an apology to finally forgive. What you need is the courage to decide that peace is more valuable than pieces. And when you truly make that decision, when you stop waiting for the other person to make it right, something within you begins to shift. That weight you've been carrying so quietly, it starts to lift. The storm you've battled on the inside begins to calm. You breathe a little deeper. You think a little clearer. You walk with a new lightness that only freedom can bring. Because letting go doesn't just set them free, it sets you free. Free to feel again, free to dream again, free to return to the version of you that existed before the disappointment, before the betrayal, before the heartbreak hardened your hope. You don't need them to come back for closure. Your healing is not dependent on their explanation. Your joy is not rooted in their presence. And your future is not defined by their approval or validation. When God begins something new in you, it often starts with a breaking of what was to make space for what will be. And yes, breaking hurts, but it also blesses. What feels like the end may be the very beginning of something sacred. So stop asking why they left and start asking what God is revealing through their absence. Stop chasing people. Start chasing purpose. Because when you finally let go of who hurt you, you open your hands to receive the people who are meant to help you. When you release what's broken, you create space for what is whole. And when you stop clinging to the temporary, you begin to embrace what is eternal. There comes a moment in every life when silence becomes deafening. When the room that once echoed with connection now feels painfully quiet. When the calls stop, the conversations fade, and the people you leaned on disappear like morning mist under the rising sun. It's in that sacred silence, when you're left alone with your thoughts, your ache, your memories, that a decision waits. Will you fall apart in the loneliness or rise within the solitude? And I'm here to remind you, solitude is not a curse. It's a calling. It's not a punishment. It's preparation. In a world that never stops moving, that thrives on constant noise and endless connection, we often forget the power of stillness. But some of the most profound growth, the kind that changes your life from the inside out, doesn't happen in a crowd. It happens in the quiet, in the moments when it's just you, your thoughts, and God. When the noise fades and the people you thought would always be there slowly drift away. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where you finally begin to meet yourself. Many of us fear being alone, not because solitude is painful, but because we've never taken the time to discover who we are without someone else beside us to define us. We tie our value to who shows up, who texts back, who applauds our presence. But when all of that disappears and you're left in silence, something sacred starts to happen. That's when the real work begins. That's when truth starts to rise. Solitude isn't weakness. It's strength, quietly being built layer by layer. It's the classroom where God shapes your identity. It's where your character is tested, where old wounds begin to close, and where your roots dig deep into something that will last. Don't run from the quiet. Don't rush to fill the space. Embrace it, because what God wants to build in you requires silence. What he wants to whisper to your spirit cannot be heard over the noise of codependency, distraction, or constant approval seeking. You might feel forgotten right now. You might feel like everyone else is moving forward while you're standing still. But what if this isn't rejection? What if it's refinement? What if this moment of stillness is actually a sacred space where God is stretching your faith, sharpening your vision, and setting you apart for something far greater than you imagined? Don't confuse isolation with abandonment. Sometimes God has to separate you in order to sanctify you. Sometimes he removes every other voice so you can finally hear his. Being alone doesn't mean you're unloved. It means you're being called to love yourself more deeply than you ever have before. It's an invitation to discover that your value doesn't disappear when the room empties. Your worth doesn't diminish because someone walked away. You are not less because they left. You're not broken or incomplete because there's no one sitting beside you. You are whole in him. You are chosen by him. You are seen even in the silence where no one else notices. And once you begin to truly believe that, something shifts. You stop chasing people just to feel connection. You stop begging for attention just to feel like you matter. You stop settling for half-hearted love just to avoid an empty evening. Because now you understand, your presence is already enough. Your time is valuable. And your peace? It's far too expensive to loan out to people who never intended to honor it. There's a quiet, steady power that rises up when you learn to enjoy your own company. When you can sit in stillness with a calm heart and not feel frantic for someone else to validate your existence. When you can walk into a room by yourself and still radiate the confidence of someone who knows they're never truly alone. Because wherever you go, God goes with you. His spirit doesn't vanish when people do. His love doesn't evaporate when others forget you. And his calling on your life doesn't weaken just because the spotlight fades. Some of the strongest men and women you'll ever meet weren't made on stages. They were refined in solitude, strengthened in the stillness, molded during late nights when the world was silent and no one was watching. They were built in places where there were no claps, no encouragement, no social media posts. Only the whisper of a faithful God saying, "I'm not done with you. I'm just getting started." So if you find yourself in a season of silence, don't resist it. Don't rush to fill the space with distractions or people who are never meant to stay. Use this time. Use it to heal what's been hidden. Use it to grow in ways you never thought you could. Use it to pray deeper, to listen harder, to reconnect with dreams you set aside. Use it to rebuild your discipline and to reclaim the identity that was never tied to anyone else to begin with. Because when the next season comes, and it will come, you won't be the same person you were before. You'll be stronger, more grounded. You won't be shaken by people walking away or swayed by shifting opinions. You'll move through life with a quiet strength, a deep inner peace, and a joy that's no longer dependent on anyone else's presence or approval. That kind of peace doesn't come from the applause of others. It doesn't come from validation or popularity. It comes from God, and it is born in the silence, in the stillness, in the lonely places where he rebuilds what others walked away from. But there's a lie the world tries to sell you, and it's subtle, quiet, but devastating. It whispers that if someone left you, it must be because you were enough, that their absence means you failed, that if they had really seen your worth, they would have stayed. And that's the wound many of us carry long after the goodbye, the false belief that we were unworthy of being chosen. But let me speak this truth to your heart. Your worth is not determined by who stays or who walks away. Your value does not rise and fall based on someone else's decision. People leave for reasons that often have nothing to do with you at all. Sometimes it's poor timing. Sometimes it's their own hidden pain. And sometimes it's God closing a door you were too afraid to shut on your own. Whatever the reason, please hear this. You are still enough. Some of you are still sitting in the shadows of rejection. Still waiting for that message that never came. Still replaying the last conversation in your head, wondering what you did wrong. Still aching in silence, asking, why wasn't I enough? But maybe the real question isn't what you did wrong. Maybe it's what God is making right. Because when people leave, it doesn't always mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes, it means they weren't meant to be part of where you're going. Sometimes, their exit was necessary to clear the way for your next chapter. And I know it hurts. I know it's hard to let go, to accept the loss. But not every loss is a tragedy. Some losses are blessings in disguise. Some painful goodbyes are actually divine protection. And some exits? They're doors swinging open to your future. You may not see it right away. Heartbreak has a way of blinding us to what's ahead. But trust this, what God removes, he always replaces. And what he replaces it with, in time, it will be greater than what you thought you lost. What walks away often makes room for what was truly meant to stay. Sometimes, the exit of one thing is the entrance to something far better. But you can't build a life on people who aren't rooted in purpose. You can't keep pouring your energy into relationships that only deplete you. At some point, you have to stop trying to prove your worth to those who are unwilling or unable to see it. If someone failed to recognize the treasure within you, that doesn't mean the treasure isn't real. It simply means they weren't the one assigned to honor it. Their inability to love you the way you needed doesn't lessen your capacity to be loved. Too many people walk through life with bruised hearts because they tied their identity to someone who never fully understood their value. But God never told you to measure your worth by how others treat you. He never said your value depends on who stays, who texts back, or who applauds your presence. He said you are fearfully and wonderfully made. chosen, called, loved with an everlasting love. And that love is not temporary. It's not conditional. It doesn't fade when people change their minds or walk away without explanation. So stop searching for validation in places that only leave you empty. Stop chasing after people who only brought confusion. If someone walked away, let them walk. Let them go, not in bitterness, not in anger, but in peace. Because if they could walk away from you, they were never assigned to your future. They may have been part of your past, but they are not necessary for what God is building next. God doesn't need them to fulfill his plan for your life. And you don't need to spend your life trying to prove anything to anyone. Your purpose is not dependent on their approval. The right people will recognize your worth without needing to be persuaded. You won't have to beg, chase, or prove yourself. The ones truly meant to walk with you, they won't hesitate. They'll stay. They'll show up. They'll bring peace, not pressure. Presence, not confusion. And when someone doesn't bring that, when all they offer is pain, uncertainty, and inconsistency, you can release them, confident that your peace is far more valuable than their presence. Let me remind you of something that never changes. Even if everyone else forgets you, God never will. Even when your name is absent from their mouths, it's still written in his hands. While others may move on and close their chapters, God is still writing your story. And the story he writes is never built around who left. It's always built on who he is. And who is he? He is faithful. He is good. He is close. The friend who stays nearer than any brother. His love doesn't fade when others grow distant. It doesn't depend on how many people surround you. It holds steady even when the room is empty. You may be walking through a season right now that feels quiet, lonely, or even invisible. It might feel like no one truly sees you, no one understands you, and no one stays long enough to know your heart. But don't let that lie plant roots in your soul. You're not too much. You're not too broken. You're not hard to love. And you are not forgotten. You're being prepared. You're being refined. You're being made stronger. Because when your identity is no longer built on people, but anchored in God, your confidence won't rise and fall with the tides of human approval. It becomes unshakable. It becomes steady. It becomes enough. So stand tall, even if you're standing alone. Keep walking forward, even if the ones you thought would walk beside you turn back. Keep loving. Keep serving. Keep shining. Because your worth isn't something to be argued, debated, or doubted. It's not hanging in the balance of someone else's opinion or approval. Your value was established the very moment God breathed life into your lungs. And the ones who couldn't see that worth, let them go. Let them wonder. Let them wrestle with what they walked away from. That's not your burden to carry anymore. You were never meant to hold the weight of their realization. Your responsibility is to become everything God created you to be, with no apologies, no hesitation, and no baggage from those who didn't see your light. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is the holiest thing to do, letting go. We talk about moving on like it's just a switch in the mind, a simple decision we wake up and make. But in reality, it's a battle deep within the soul. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Before the healing comes, there is a tearing, a painful unraveling. The tearing away of dreams you once clung to. The letting go of people you once imagined forever with. The surrender of plans you built your future around. Letting go is not just about walking away. It's about releasing the weight you were never built to carry in the first place. Some of us are still holding on so tightly to the past that our knuckles are white, our hearts are tired, and our spirits are nearly empty. We say we want peace, but refuse to let go of the very things stealing it. We say we trust God, yet we keep reaching back for what He already asked us to lay down. What would happen if we finally loosen our grip? And that's the real struggle, isn't it? Trusting that what's behind you is no longer meant for you. Believing that when God closes a door, it's not rejection, it's redirection. Holding on to the faith that what you've lost won't limit what's still ahead. So often, we find ourselves stuck in spiritual traffic. Not because the road ahead is blocked, but because we're too afraid to let go of what's behind. We want to step into the new, but we won't release the old. We ask for freedom, but we're still clinging tightly to the chains. God is trying to bring you into something better. A new space, a higher place, a deeper peace. But he won't pry your fingers open. He won't force surrender. He simply invites you to let go. And letting go doesn't mean what you felt wasn't real. It doesn't mean the love didn't matter. It doesn't erase the sincerity of your loyalty or the depth of the connection you once held dear. It just means that God saw what you couldn't see. He saw the cracks that were forming beneath the surface, the fragile pieces you tried so hard to keep together. He saw the misalignment, the strain, the quiet unraveling. And in his mercy, he allowed what would have eventually broken you to be removed now, so it wouldn't destroy you later. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about growing up, growing in faith, growing in wisdom, growing in trust. It's saying, God, I don't understand why this had to happen, but I trust you enough to release it anyway. You don't have to understand everything to take a step forward. You don't need an apology or a perfect explanation to walk into healing. When God gives you clarity, you don't need closure from people. Because sometimes closure doesn't come with a conversation. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence. And that silence can be the loudest confirmation of all. Sometimes closure comes quietly, in unanswered calls, in the silence after the storm, in the ache that lingers but slowly softens with each obedient step forward. And yes, grief might still wash over you in waves. Don't mistake that for weakness. It's not. It's the echo of a heart that loved deeply and gave wholeheartedly. But even grief, no matter how heavy, is only meant to stay for a season. You were never created to build a home in heartbreak. You're not called to pitch a tent in the ruins of what broke you. There's a time to grieve, to feel, to mourn what was lost. But there's also a time to rise, to rebuild, and to believe that joy can return. The pain you experienced may have shaped you, but don't let it define you. You are more than the wound, more than who walked away, more than what fell apart. Letting go also means releasing the guilt you've quietly carried. Some of you are still blaming yourself for things that were never yours to bear. You're carrying burdens God never intended you to hold. It's time to forgive yourself. You did the best you could with the understanding you had at the time. You gave your heart. You stayed when others left. You prayed even when the answers didn't come. And even though it didn't unfold the way you hoped, that doesn't mean you failed. That's not failure. That's growth. That's life. That's grace in motion. You'll never be able to fully step into the promise if your hands are still clinging to the pain. You have to let it go. Lay it down at the feet of the one who knows every tear you've cried in secret, who understands your silent battles, who sees the weight your heart has carried day after day. Letting go won't rewrite the past, but it will rewrite you. It will free your hands to receive something new. It will clear the fog from your eyes so you can finally see the beauty that still lies ahead. God can't fill hands that are already clenched tight. He can't pour fresh blessings into a heart that's still guarded by the pain of old wounds. But if you're willing to open your hands and say, Lord, I release it to you, that's where true restoration begins. That's the doorway where peace quietly enters and where joy, long buried, slowly starts to rise again. It won't happen overnight, but like the steady rise of the sun after a long and weary night, it will come. Little by little, light by light. Letting go might feel like loss in the beginning. It may feel like a surrender that costs too much. But in time, you'll look back and realize it wasn't loss. It was protection in disguise. It was grace at work behind the scenes. God wasn't taking something away to hurt you. He was preparing you, positioning you for what's next, shielding you from what could have broken you later. And when you finally release what was never meant to stay, you make space for what's been waiting to enter your life all along. We live in a world that thrives on noise, that praises connection, that often equates solitude with rejection. We're told that if you're alone, you must be unloved, unwanted, forgotten. But none of that is true. That's not what the Word of God teaches. Solitude is not your enemy. It's often the sacred ground where transformation takes root. It's in the quiet, not the crowd, where your soul begins to heal, where your faith deepens, where clarity rises, Some of life's most powerful breakthroughs happen when no one else is watching. Not because you're isolated, but because you're being set apart. There are times when God will intentionally pull you away. He'll remove you from the noise, from the crowd, from the voices that once influenced you, not as punishment, but as preparation. And if you don't recognize His purpose in that season, you may begin to mistake the silence for abandonment. But sometimes God has to quiet every other voice around you so you can finally hear His voice within you. He sometimes has to strip away the distractions, silence the noise, and remove the things that keep you from seeing Him clearly. Why? Because before He brings anyone else to walk beside you, He wants you to know how to be whole with Him alone. We often believe healing comes through relationships or external comfort. But real healing? Sometimes it starts in the wilderness, when the voices fade, when the crowd disappears, when the phone stops buzzing and no one checks in. It's in that sacred stillness. When your room is quiet and your tears fall with no one there to witness, that God begins His deepest work. That's where He whispers truth to your heart. That's when you begin to realize you're not truly alone. You're just alone with Him. And that kind of solitude, it's not abandonment. It's intimacy. You see, the world tries to convince you that you need someone to complete you. But if you believe that, it means you're starting from a place of emptiness. And God didn't create you lacking. He didn't form you as one half of a whole. He created you fully, fearfully, and wonderfully made. Whole. And when you finally learn to enjoy your own company, when you can sit in stillness without reaching for distractions, when you find peace in solitude instead of panic, that's when you know you've stepped into true freedom. Being alone doesn't mean being broken. It means being brave. It means facing your thoughts without fear. It means letting go of the pressure to perform for others and instead learning to rest in the presence of God. It takes courage to believe that your worth isn't defined by who's beside you. It takes faith to know your value doesn't shrink just because your calendar is empty. So many of us fill our lives with noise, people, plans, screens, because deep down, we fear what silence might reveal. But what if silence is where strength is born? What if that quiet is the very place where God prepares you for the next chapter? It's in that quiet, unhurried space where God whispers, "I am enough for you." When you're truly alone, without distractions or masks, you begin to meet yourself for the first time. Not the version shaped by expectations, not the face you wear for the world, but the real you. The one who wrestles with doubts, holds onto unspoken dreams, and is still in the process of healing. And when you choose to see that version of yourself with grace, when you learn to love that person just as they are, something shifts. You realize your joy was never meant to be held in someone else's hands. There's strength in discovering how to be content in your own company. There's quiet wisdom in enjoying a meal without needing anyone across the table. There's deep peace in knowing how to worship, how to cry, how to grow, and how to pray without an audience or applause. When you can sit with yourself and not feel incomplete. When solitude doesn't trigger loneliness but reveals wholeness. That's when you begin to understand the powerful presence of God. Even Jesus, in all His divinity, stepped away from the crowds. He didn't avoid silence. He pursued it. He climbed mountains alone to pray, withdrew from noise to find clarity, and found strength not in public affirmation, but in sacred solitude. If the Son of God embraced stillness to connect with the Father, then how much more do we need to do the same? Maybe what we've called loneliness is actually an invitation. Maybe being alone isn't a punishment, it's a preparation. Being alone doesn't always mean being left behind. Sometimes it's a divine pause, a sacred season of refinement. It's the training ground of your character, the testing place of your faith, and the unfolding space where your purpose becomes clearer. So don't rush to fill the silence. Don't despise the stillness. Learn to lean into it, because in those quiet moments, you'll discover a glory that noise can't offer, and a joy in solitude that can only come from God. There's a quiet kind of strength in realizing that your happiness doesn't depend on someone walking beside you. It's not rooted in who stays or who leaves. It's found in the unshakable truth that God walks within you. When you truly believe that, the fear of being alone begins to lose its grip. You stop fearing solitude because you know that you're never really by yourself. God is closer than your next breath, more present than your deepest thoughts. And His love, it isn't based on what you've done, what you have, or who you're connected to. He loves you simply because you are His. Even if the world forgets your name, even if every voice around you goes silent, even if every door you hoped would open stays shut, His presence doesn't leave. His love remains. His peace stays steady. His faithfulness endures. So if you're in a season where it feels like you're standing all alone, don't run from it. Don't resist it. Embrace it. Sit with it. Let it teach you. Let it reveal what you truly carry inside. Because it's in those moments when no one else is around that God steps in and begins shaping you from the inside out. You won't be in this season forever, but learning how to be truly content with just Him, that's a lesson you'll carry for a lifetime. There's a depth of joy that can only be discovered in solitude, and it becomes a source of peace that no crowd could ever give. And be careful, because the enemy often doesn't attack with noise. He attacks with whispers, subtle lies, thoughts that creep in softly like, you'll always be alone, or you're not enough. They come during the quiet moments, when you're tired, when you just let go of someone you cared about, or when you're walking through life's valleys without a hand to hold. In those fragile moments, the enemy wants to convince you that this silence is proof of failure, that this solitude is a form of punishment. But friend, it's not. It's preparation, and it's holy. But I want you to hold on to this truth. Being alone does not mean you've been abandoned. Just because the path you're walking feels quieter now doesn't mean you've lost your direction. Sometimes, God allows everything familiar to be stripped away, not to break you, but to set you apart. He removes relationships, shifts you out of certain circles, and silences the noise of applause and opinions. Not to punish you, but to teach you something deeper. He wants you to stop anchoring your identity in who's around you and start discovering the power of who lives within you. Because as long as you're leaning on others to define your worth, you'll miss the joy that comes from being grounded solely in Him. Can you truly hear your own calling when it's drowned out by a crowd's expectations? Do you really need someone else to validate the value that God already placed inside you? Here's the truth. You don't need a crowd to confirm your calling. You don't need a relationship to prove your worth. You don't need to be constantly surrounded to matter. What you need is to realize that your significance isn't up for debate. It's already been settled by the one who created you. And sometimes, you won't fully know what you're made of until you face a season where there's no one left to lean on but God. It's in those silent moments that you begin to hear the sound of your soul. Unfiltered, unshaken. In the stillness, God's voice becomes clearer, and in solitude, your roots grow deeper. Not into people, not into titles, not into things that fade, but into eternal truth, into purpose, into Him. People may walk away, doors might close, the phone may stop ringing, and invitations may no longer come, but that doesn't mean you're not moving forward. Progress isn't always loud or visible. It often shows up in the quiet moments when you're learning to stand on your own. So don't measure your growth by how many people surround you. Measure it by the depth of your peace when you're alone. Measure it by the resilience of your faith when there's no one clapping, no one watching, no spotlight, just you and God. Measure it by the way you continue to show up day after day, still praying, still believing, still trusting, even when your heart feels heavy. God isn't preparing you for popularity. He's preparing you for purpose. And purpose isn't born in applause. It's born in silence. In the fire, in those hidden places, your prayer room, your late nights, your private tears, your unwavering praise when no one else even knows you're struggling. That's where your strength is being forged. That's where your calling becomes clearer. That's where your destiny begins to take shape. And yes, there will be moments when it feels unbearably lonely. There will be days when you question, is it really worth it? You'll glance around and see others seemingly advancing faster, climbing higher, living easier. But comparison? It's a thief. It will rob you of vision and peace if you let it. You don't know the battles they're fighting behind the smiles. You don't see the compromises they made just to look like they're winning. But you are being sustained by grace. You are being refined in the fire, not destroyed by it. And when the time is right, when your character aligns with your calling, God will open doors that no man can shut. He will align the right people at the right time. He'll bring the right connections, open the right doors, but not a moment before you're ready. God will never hand you a blessing you're not yet built to carry. That's exactly why this time of solitude matters more than you realize. It's not a delay, it's preparation. It's not rejection, it's protection. It's not punishment, it's pruning. He's cutting away the parts of you that were never meant to continue into your next season. He's stripping off the layers of people-pleasing and a craving for external validation, so you can finally walk confidently in your purpose. No approval needed. He's breaking the chains of needing permission just to be who he already called you to be. He's setting you free from the addiction to applause, to being liked, to constantly needing affirmation. He's teaching you how to stand tall in your faith, how to believe boldly in the calling over your life, how to trust him completely. Even when there's no audience watching, no cheering crowd, no pat on the back. There's a blessing in being alone. Because when the noise disappears, when the crowd thins out, when the spotlight fades, that's when what's real begins to rise. That's when truth steps in. And when your joy is rooted in truth instead of trends. When your confidence is built on God's voice instead of public opinion. When your peace is no longer dependent on anyone else's presence, but his, that's when you find real freedom. You won't feel the need to chase people who walked away. You won't have to beg to be seen or bend yourself to earn approval. You'll walk with a quiet confidence that can't be shaken. Your voice will gain clarity. Your steps will have purpose. And the presence you carry won't come from how many followers you have, but from the depth of your faith. And maybe the world won't get it. That's perfectly fine. You weren't designed to blend in. You were created to shine, to lead, to stand apart. So walk through this quiet season with boldness. Don't fear the stillness. Don't rush the silence. God is doing something deep within you, something lasting, something eternal. He is shaping you in the shadows for a future that will reflect his glory. And when the moment is right, what he began in private, he will unveil in power. You're not behind. You are being built for something greater. Wishing you strength, health, and peace on your journey. And don't forget to subscribe to Mindset Daily for more powerful encouragement.